Welcome to part 2 of the voice modulation series that we are continuing. So, over here, I'll give you a couple more examples of how exactly you navigate with the mood. But before it, some primary ideas. Any sentence, each and every sentence that you pick up in front of you has some sort of idea that needs to be conveyed through it. Whether it is a sad idea, whether it is a happy idea, whether it is an idea that needs to be spread on a different level, or whether it is an idea that simply needs to create impact, right? Now, many a times, even when the idea is boring enough, you can change it using voice modulation. Like I gave you a pretty good example in the last video, I think, of the idea of war. Now, even if someone went on in a stretch about war, of course it would create a different impact in the room with a proper introduction, with a proper idea, with a proper whole story building analogy, right? But the thing that we need to consider over here is anything can be transformed with the effects of voice modulation. Like this is a random copy in front of me, right? So there's a sentence behind it. You have a notebook, but do you know how to take notes? Now, suppose I was in sales. Consider I need to sell it, right? And there is an audience of 500 sitting in front of me. So, how exactly will I read this line? Now, someone might read this line as you have a notebook, but do you know how to take notes, right? So, that's the first type. But there is no sort of modulation where there is no sort of anything that is given into the sentence. But the first thing that we need to realize, ladies and gentlemen, is the work that goes in saying the word but itself. What does the word but signify? But signifies some sort of disagreement, right? So every time you say the word but, you must stress upon the rest of the sentence with a pause in front of it in order to signify that, okay, this isn't happening, but this is what is happening. This is the primary idea. This is what we are proposing instead of the first idea, which was represented in the first part of the sentence. So, you have a notebook, but do you know how to take notes? So, that gives a completely different essence. So, first, I'm conveying the fact that the person already knows in front of me that you all do have a notebook, right? You all do have a notebook, but then I'm pausing. Do you know how to take notes? Now, this form of inquiry that I'm putting, this rhetoric, do you know how to take notes, is again a very, very important part of whatever speech you are giving. Because the question mark is a particular oratory mark that often gets ignored because people somehow think that, okay, I'll simply say it as some sort of question and I'll move on. But what you should always remember is when you are giving question marks, it is pretty important in order to break the sentence before the question mark apart. Because if you read the sentence like this, I'll give you an example. You have a notebook, but do you know how to take notes? Compare this to you have a notebook, but do you know how to take notes? So there's a difference, right? So the rhetoric that is sounded along with the word notes needs to be separate so that a person can connect those two ideas instead of stretching it into a long sentence where the person is not able to follow. But in this case, the sentence is pretty short enough, right? So even if you combine it into an idea, as in you have a notebook, but do you know how to take notes? In that case, you can still convey the idea pretty well, right? But in some cases, in some long sentences, you cannot exactly understand that, okay, if I'm stretching a rhetoric into a long sentence and then putting a question mark expression at the end, the listener often gets confused as to what exactly is the person trying to say. Moving on, I'll give this an example. I'll give this a small example to you. As I was saying, a big part of voice modulation also comes from your emotions, right? The emotions that you are trying to convey. So I'm pretty sure you all have heard of a particular poem called Casabianca. Now, obviously, I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. I'll read only three paras of it to you, three pretty expression requiring paras, and you will say, okay, Moina, this is just recitation, we learned about this in elocution, but it is an extremely important skill again. in debates, in speeches, in declamation, in voice modulation, everywhere. So I'll break it down exactly where I give a pause and where I do not. And I'll also post the three paras that I'm reading from Casabianca over here in the description. So make sure to follow them. Firstly, upon his brow he felt their breath, and in his waving hair, and looked from that lone post of death in still yet brave despair. Now, the poem is basically upon a boy who is stuck on a particular ship, and it was amidst war, and his father, the commanding general of that particular ship, was most probably killed, if I'm not sure, but was not able to respond from the deck below. And thereby, he was asking for a reply from his father himself, right? So, how exactly would you go about it if you were given to read? So, the para that I chose, upon his brow he felt their breath. And then a pause. You know why a pause? Because it's a comma. And ladies and gentlemen, please do not disregard the pause that comes with the comma. Because I've seen speakers read it out like this. Upon his brow he felt their breath, and in his waving hair. Simply because there is an and. But no. Even when there is an and, there is a pause. Just like the significance with the word but, as I had just explained, the word and also entails a pause before and after it. Because with the word and, you are trying to convey an idea both in front and after it. So you will specially signify that particular word. Upon his brow, he felt their breath, pause, and in his waving hair. So over here, you will realize that even though after the word bro, there isn't a pause, that upon his bro, he felt their breath, I am putting a pause, right? So in a particular sentence, when you say that once upon a time, right, in each and every single fable that you've ever read, there has been a comma. So based upon it, based upon your inborn intellectuality, you can easily say that upon his brow and then a pause, he felt their breath, and in his waving hair, and looked from that lone post of death in still yet brave despair. So, what exactly do you want to convey over here? And looked from that lone post of death. So, over here, you will realize how I exactly dipped my voice, right? Because there is no hope that is being conveyed in this sentence. They're saying that he's stranded in that one position alone, a position of death where he has no other help of any sort. And in the next sentence, you say, in still, and then a comma, which is why it entails another pause. In still, yet brave despair. So, in the word brave, there is some sort of hope, which is why I raise my voice again, and then despair, which is why I lengthen the word. I lengthen the word in order to convey the melancholy. So this is how it looks. Upon his brow, he felt their breath, and in his waving hair, and looked from that lone post of death in still yet brave despair. Moving on. And shouted but once more aloud, my father, must I stay? While over him fast, through sail and shrouds, the wreathing fires made way. So there are a couple of things that need to be noted over here. I'll be doing two paras over here in order to stay within time, right? So, and shouted but once more aloud. So over here you need to increase your voice, obviously, because the poem itself says, and shouted but once more aloud, my father, must I stay? In this sentence, firstly, my father, then an exclamation mark. So you obviously need to raise your voice over here. And what exactly do you need to convey? Your desperation, ladies and gentlemen. My father, must I stay? And you need to convey that fear through your voice of being stranded in an area that has been completely burnt down. And you might say, okay, Moina, why will I need this in a debate, right? So you will definitely need this in a debate. So suppose you are conveying some sort of distraction, that suppose I am speaking on a motion that is speaking against social media, and I am for the motion, that is I am saying that okay, social media distracts us a lot. So if I want to convey it in a sarcastic mode, I might be like, sure, I wake up each and every single morning and I open Instagram and I learn about integration. It definitely helps me a lot. I mean, why wouldn't it? The opposition is saying exactly correct things, right? There is nothing wrong in this. So you see, the sarcasm that I'm trying to communicate over here is made much more obvious with my expressions and the voice modulations that I'm doing. So that is where it helps you. Moving on. While over him fast through sail and shroud. So over here you are again getting into a story building mode. That is, you are again narrating what's happening. You are narrating a very sad part. So you are saying, while over him fast through sail and shroud, the wreathing fires made way. So over here in wreathing fires, you are again trying to communicate a part or a characteristic about the fires, right? So the wreathing fires, the fires which won't stop at anything, which will consume everything in their part. So you are putting that enthusiasm into your line as well. The wreathing fires made way. And in the last para, they wrapped the ship in splendor wild, they caught the flag on high and streamed above the gallant child like banners in the sky. So in the first part of this para, what I'm trying to do is they wrapped the ship in splendor while, and then a pause. They caught the flag on high, and you'll see how in this particular tone I have some sort of anticipation in my voice because I know that something else is supposed to happen. The climax is left, so I have that suspense in my voice. They wrapped the ship in splendor wild. They caught the flag on high and streamed above the gallant child like banners in the sky. So they streamed above the gallant child is the climax of this part. That is, it conveys the main idea. And the two lines before it have some sort of anticipation in them, some sort of suspense that not only keeps the readers on edge, but also helps you in a story building mode much better. Like banners in the sky. And then is something that is glorious. Not good glorious, but rather sad glorious, of course. So you need to emphasize it again because there was a boom in the sky at that point and you need to communicate it just as well. So if you want any sort of further clarification on where I put a pause and where exactly I didn't, you can definitely let me know in the comments. And if you had some sort of doubt, you can definitely replay that part again and follow me for more such stuff, and definitely tell what other particular proses or what particular other stories that I can pick up and in turn show you in order to get this better, because irrespective of how much voice modulation you put in, it's sometimes not enough. Because one of the main part, as I had already mentioned, humor is extremely integral in Oxford debating, right? So in the debates that go on in my region where I live, like in Kolkata, humor is a very important part. It's an integral part. Humor and sarcasm depend only upon delivery, depend only upon voice modulation. It depends on how exactly you are able to sway a person's mind. You know, like if you are able to draw a point from something that is completely unrelated to something that strikes a different kind of thought in that person's mind, like the more unrelatable topic that you choose in order to bring into light a much more relatable topic, the better will be your humor that you are trying to provide. And that is what these pauses coming, like sarcasm in a particular speech can never be put properly enough until you use voice modulation, until you use your pauses, because otherwise people will just think that you are literally saying facts which are wrong, when in turn you are just trying to prove sarcasm, right? So that is an extremely essential skill that we need to develop, and more on this on part 3 of the video of this particular series, and I hope to meet you guys again back over there. Thank you very much.